And welcome everyone to the fourth session of our Guilt-Free Book Club for this fall semester, where we're going to discuss what inclusive instructors do, principles and practices for excellence in college teaching by Tracy Marcella Addy et al. In exciting news, I just interviewed Tracy Addy for the Collab podcast, so stay tuned, end of January. Episode 10 of our podcast is going to come out featuring my interview with the author of this book, Dr. Tracy Addy. It was a great interview. And we're thrilled to have folks from the colleges of the Fenway and beyond at this session. Very exciting. So we'll just do a quick go around and share your name, where you work, what you do there. And the theme of this particular session is working toward awareness and self-reflection in our classrooms and communities. So for our prompt, we're going to just do a little bit of reflection, and you can reflect on, what has worked well this semester, what hasn't worked well, if that's something that speaks to you. Also, there's this quote that we have included on our Teaching and Learning Collaborative reflection website and on our reflection journals. If you'd like one, we'd be happy to get one to you. It's a quote by John Dewey, or attributed to John Dewey anyway. He says, "We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." So it's not the experience itself that teaches us or that we kind of make meaning out of. It's actually the process of looking back at that experience and making that meaningful is where we do the real learning and growth. And so just thinking about that, when have you learned something new by looking back at something with a new perspective and a new vantage point? As part of this theme of working toward awareness and self-reflection in our work in universities, whatever it is that we do at universities. So I'll start. My name is Josh Luckins. Work at the Wentworth Institute of Technology here in Boston as an instructional designer. It's a really interesting quote by Dewey. I love this idea because I used to work as an experiential educator, and we'd come up with all sorts of crazy fun things for students to do, and activities and everything. And sometimes it would just happen and then like move on from there. And then people at the end would be like, "Oh, what did the students really get out of it?" And it was then that I kind of really started to hone my skills at debriefing, and that the real essence or the meaning came in the debrief of like, "Oh yeah, why was that important?" Or why do you think we did this? Or how does this like ball throwing exercise relate to the bigger values we're trying to create in our community of inclusion, or whatever it might be? And that's when people said like really deep stuff that I was like, wow, I never could have put that in words the way you did. That's so beautiful. I learned something from you. We learned something from each other. And we really had this, shared thing that we built together. So I think for me, that's one setting or educational setting where that notion of learning from reflecting on experience really came to life. Thanks so much.
Suzanne, you can go. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, so I'm Suzanne Edmonds. I'm an instructional designer at Simmons. I also wear another hat where I am adjunct instructor for Simmons 301 course, which is kind of like a freshman seminar, but for third years. That's the best way I know how to explain that. And I wear another hat that is the course lead for the Sim 201 and 301 courses, so that I'm kind of the department chair for those faculty members. And so for reflection for me, this is my first year doing the course lead stuff. And so last semester, I was only an adjunct instructor. And I tried to think about my view of kind of learning the ropes of what the course lead did. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but it wasn't a lot. So I kind of felt like I was just thrown to do this course and, hey, good luck. Don't really know what to tell you other than that. And so I really thought, as I was planning out our community of practice sessions and our feedback sessions, because we changed up some of the coursework this semester, of what did he not do that I would like to do? Or how could I improve based on what I would have liked as just the instructor? And so I really took that into account and reflected on that whenever I set up these community of practice sessions and these agendas and things to talk about, because I really tried to make a difference and help faculty along, because a lot of times with these courses, faculty are, again, just kind of thrown out there and here's your course. It's already created for you. You're good. You can teach it. But if you have questions, good luck. And so I tried to be more hands-on. I tried to communicate more. I tried to hold these sessions to where it was very positive. And, if anybody had any issues, they could come to me. And so finally, I had my final feedback session actually yesterday afternoon and got lots of positive feedback as far as how I structured everything. So the reflection helped, but just to be able to say that everything went so well based on faculty's opinions was huge for me.
I'm so glad to hear a reflection win there in that regard, and especially such a practical example too of concrete things that you could do differently based on your own experience, and realizing that was not the experience you wanted to replicate for your students. And Josh, I'm kind of stumped by this question, actually, because there's so many different directions it could go in, both a philosophical and a practical, but I'll do my best to not ramble too much here. My name is Megan Hamilton Giebert, and I am the Associate Director of Learning Design Solutions at the Teaching and Learning Collaborative at Wentworth. Too many words, that's okay. And I think the weirdest example of reflection that's coming to mind for me is that I like to journal, and I have liked to journal since I was a little kid. And I like the fun of reading an old journal and being super embarrassed and humiliated by it, of like, I can't believe I thought that, I can't believe I was experiencing that. And, being able to read it with, wiser eyes and synthesize that experience into a new story, that leads to this really philosophical insight that our concept of truth is always changing, and it's so informed by the current experience that we can't broaden our sense of truth without actually reflecting on what we previously thought and revising basically with the new information and experiences that we have. So I don't really have a specific example other than wanting to dive into some of my childhood journals and then, scream in terror at what I wrote. But just the value of the act of reflecting shines through for me with that case study. And that's enough about the personal life of Megan Hamilton Giebert. So I'm going to go on mute.
I'll just say something brief, which is that I've been in my job for a while, and I started out as a library assistant, and now I'm a librarian. So I was fortunate enough to work side by side the head librarian here, director of libraries, Jean Morrow, and this is like my 30th year. I can hardly believe it. But so I probably should have been an archivist, but anyway, I've kept so much of instructions she gave me. She retired in 2015, but I was going over it the other day. I'm trying to on Friday nowadays, I have this thing called No New Things Day, so that I'm trying to catch up, especially with COVID. I got so far behind, and I am anyway. So I pulled up this folder, and it was really clear how Jean would, in this case, it was do replacements for scores that were either mostly lost and paid. And I was just going through to see what her workflow was, what the questions were that she asked. And it was really, really informative, because it was nice for me to reflect, how I've grown since then, but what she thought was important, what I think is important. And then, technology has come in to play now. So we're doing so many things so differently. It is more complicated now. I mean, it was much easier before, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of having a broader viewpoint. I could see the universe a little easier. But now, for example, we're dividing up tasks in smaller groups, and we're going to Trello, for example, using technology to help us, do replacements a little more transparently, because this allows the technical services team to know where I am at each step. So we've set it up, lost and paid. Have you selected? Are you going to replace it? Blah. So we have a nice little, it's really well thought out. The technical services had set it up for me. And so anyway, it's good to reflect. It's good to go forward. And I guess I'll just stop right there. I thought that was just one example of how we're moving forward, but it is good to reflect on what before us. As I said, I think before it was easier in some ways because I just had one big fat folder and I just went, lickety split through everything. And now it's a little more complicated, but it is more specific. It's like allows you to laser, slice things more. And
Thank you
that's
so
all.
much, Maria Jane. It's great to have you here from the New England Conservatory of Music, one of our neighboring colleges, not explicitly in the colleges of the Fenway, but so excited that you were able to find us and that you are with us this afternoon. And I know you'll have to go soon, so I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned before we started recording something that an initiative you undertook last year that actually ties into the topic of last month's Guilt Free Book Club, which was reimagine representation. So 3 questions for you. What is it that you did to reimagine representation in the music collection at the New England Conservatory of Music? Why did you choose to do that? What brought your awareness, given our topic today of how did you get there? What raised your awareness of that? And what have you seen as the impact of that move, that decision?
I try to keep my eye on the weekly happenings at the school. So I make a point of going through that. And then I noticed there was a online webinar for one of the classes in pedagogy and on diversity, including diversity in teaching. In this case, it was voice. So I thought, well, geez, I think I'm going to go to that. And I did. So it was a world expert on the music of Black and composers. And so I took notes. She included, I got to say, it was a great seminar. But anyway, I sought out and got her notes. So I got bibliographic references, any plus lists of repertoire websites. So armed with that, then I went back and did my work. It took me about a year really to complete it all. And then I submitted it to our DEI official at NEC. Now, the impact, I don't know yet. I mean, that sounds truth. I mean, I wish I could say circulation just shot right up, but it's hard to say. We're going through some growth and some changes here. We have a new research and instruction librarian. We never had one just specifically for that. So I assume that, and I'm going to, in the new year, 2023, I'm going to be sending over my materials to him so he can include it in hopefully a LibGuide or something like that and include it in his instructions. And I assume that's one thing, I'm sure it happens in other disciplines, but just because you are, let's say, a person of color does not mean you self-identify as that. And so you can't necessarily, when you're cataloging, it's a tricky thing to advertise everything and get the word out to your students that we have these materials. And so we're working on it. It's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Well, questions?
Thank you so much for sharing that story.
Sure.
And I think, it is hard to know the impact. What a great thing about building a library collection is that at the end of the day, it might be something that a student 20 years from now finds a score of music they wouldn't have found otherwise due to your efforts to expand the repertoire of what composers are represented in the library collection. And, that changes the course of their music career or helps them feel a greater sense of belonging at the conservatory. So that's a wonderful thing, and it's okay not to know the impact necessarily, have it be measurable explicitly. So thank you for sharing that story. And I know if you have to drop off at any point, no worries. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming, and you're welcome at any time. And also tell your colleagues and friends to join us. And obviously the recordings are available for previous sessions if you'd like to check it out.
Thank you so much. I'll stick around for a few more minutes and then I'll probably just get out. Thank you.
Sounds really good. I'm going to share a quick quote from our book here from page 34. It's a quote actually from a professor who says that inclusive teaching is a set of practices that emerge out of my intrapersonal awareness of my positionality and interpersonal awareness of who is in my course. It includes pedagogical choices, curricular choices, and communication choices that seek to empower all learners to meet their potential and to avoid practices that serve to marginalize students in my course. So I thought that was a great quote, contained a lot. We could spend a long time just unpacking everything within that quote itself. But I wanted to raise this question that came up in my conversation with Tracy Addy. She talks a lot about moving from an instructor-centered mindset to a student-centered mindset, and that maybe traditional instruction or the way that a lot of faculty may have been taught themselves was a bit more of an instructor-centered mindset, and that what this instructor is describing in this quotation is a bit more of a student-centered mindset. And so I wanted to ask you all to reflect on what that means to you, what that has meant to you, and how you see that taking place in your roles and at your institutions.
While y'all are considering the question, Josh, do you have a page number on that quote? I want to add it to our collaborative notes doc.
34. Yeah, it's just the instructor quote at the very top of the page. Yeah, about inclusive teaching. So what do y'all think? How does this idea of student-centered shift from an instructor-centered mindset or practice towards a student-centered practice, what does that mean to you, and how do you see that happening or not happening where you are?
So for me, I feel like student-centered is taking the students' perspectives into account more than the instructors necessarily. I think COVID actually, and the pandemic in general, changed a lot of that here recently, especially for people at Simmons, because I hear the words mental health. I hear the words, taking students' perspectives into account. I hear those words a lot more than I used to. And so I think focusing on those things is becoming more of a light for others than they used to be. So that's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, I will say in our institution, I'll give the president credit for this. She is putting a lot greater weight on what student feedback now. So, for example, I don't know if this is too focused or not, but we have an example, for example, in music, the performance of opera in blackface. What do you do with that, right? It's a big deal. And I remember when I'm fortunate enough to have two wonderful students work for me, and they report back from the field, let me know what's going on in classes. And she was very concerned about this. She said she approached the instructor, and he seemed to think it was not a big deal. And she was telling me, I can't believe that. So I said, well, you just, follow regulations and, follow procedures and things like that. I'm sure this person just doesn't know, or is not, he's not informed enough on how to teach this. Let's put it this way. It is difficult because it happened and you're teaching a music history class. So there you go. It's complicated, isn't it?
Definitely. That's a great example of the importance of increasing awareness, right? Because as an instructor, you may be doing something that you think is a field norm and that is acceptable to do based on the standards under which you were taught, but that style of teaching is having a detrimental effect to your students and a harmful effect to your students, and you need somebody to step in, whether it's from student feedback or from an advocate on the student's behalf, like it sounds like who was in this situation, to be able to change the behavior and to stop the destructive behavior from occurring. And but that's the power of awareness and self-reflection, and definitely fits with our topic today.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was in another call not too long ago, and they were talking about the kind of balance between, maintaining harmony at the cost of perhaps continuing continuing to perpetuate systems that marginalize, versus kind of uprooting some of these things and shaking things up at the cost of harmony. And in this book, in this particular, page 34, I underlined the word feel. Students feel like 16 times, because the focus of this particular section that we're reading is on how students feel, how the things that are happening in the classroom make students feel. And as we know, everything that happens in class is the class. Whether it's the title of the book is What Inclusive Instructors Do. Everything that happens in class is the class. So whether that's things that have to do with just how communication's happening, or side comments, or something a student says that isn't addressed that might be problematic, or just the hidden curriculum of how things work that are kind of understood implicitly or whatever. So all these things impact students' feeling, and something she really emphasizes at the beginning is that these equitable strategies be used to promote belonging, to promote feelings of belonging. Because when students feel belonging, then they're able to feel agency, then they're able to feel more confidence and willingness to speak up, speak out, and participate, and see themselves, feel seen and heard, and all these positive feelings we want. And I think that some of the kind of older school instructor-centered mentality isn't concerned with how students felt. It was a bit more about, well, my job is to deliver the content, and that's it, no matter how you feel about it. And we're kind of coming around with some of this more trauma-informed pedagogy to a new understanding of the importance of that, and a new role for professors of actually, you do have to kind of be a psychologist, not professionally, but just in terms of actually taking those feelings into account. So what are y'all's thoughts on this, the importance of belonging, and on this notion of how to take the feelings of everyone into account in the room, in all of these challenging circumstances that we find ourselves in academic contexts?
I was actually speaking with an instructor the other day, and he had made the comment that he said something wrong in class. It was a face-to-face course, and he said something incorrect about a student's pronoun. And instead of glossing over it and just kind of going on like he didn't do anything wrong, he actually stopped, thought for a moment, and then they had a conversation about what happened, and how he basically said, "I'm not perfect. I mess up as well. Let's take this time to kind of learn." And I don't know that would have happened 5 years ago.
What I like about that story is it allows the instructor to model a mistake. And that's something that I feel like that doesn't happen very often in the classroom, and especially from the instructor. Like we pay lip service to the idea of, oh yeah, feel free to fail in the classroom, make mistakes, learn from them. But then if we don't provide any data about how a student can actually do that, it's not going to have value. So I am glad that instructor was able to pause and then use, the mistake that they made to show, here's how we can, learn from this, and how to amend for it and move forward in a positive way.
Megan, I just wanted to second that. Modeling is such a powerful form of changing behaviors. If anything, we're encouraging civilization to maybe get beyond where we are right now. I mean, that's what's the purpose of education. It goes to the broader point of helping you to live your life in a broader, more rewarding way. And with enrollments going down, it's even more important. So I think that instructor really did. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for that, because that was beautiful. I don't know if that would happen here, but there are too many experts here. But yeah, thanks. Listen, I'm going to go. Thank you so much. I'm going to look up that book. You're going to get an interlibrary loan request, I think.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Check out the book and check out the podcast. You'll get the Cliff Notes with the interview that comes out in the end of January.
Okay. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Now.
Bye.
Wow. It's always fun to meet new people, have new people pop into the Zoom. That's part of the exciting thing about running this. Well, I love that story also because it was about, not only what is what happens, but what often doesn't happen, what often it's easier not to address, or, the unsaid, and some of that, raising that up into the light. So I thought that was a really nice anecdote. So yeah, another thing that I talked about with Tracy Addy, and it comes up in the book, is acting on this belief that diversity is an asset rather than a liability. And I think that there's, you wouldn't come across a lot of people who would say diversity is a liability, but what does it mean to act on that? And I think that that anecdote of, I asked for your pronouns and then I got it wrong, and let's talk about that. That is an action that raises up diversity as an asset rather than a liability, because it celebrates someone's identity in a way that's public, and that makes that student feel seen, and that makes, I guess, everyone else in the room feel that whatever they're bringing would be seen as well. What are y'all's thoughts about that? Other ways that we act on our belief that diversity is an asset?
So I told you in the beginning that I'm the course lead for these courses. And these courses have been redesigned. And so this semester they're teaching about diversity statements, because it's such a huge, huge thing when you go into, because these courses prepare students for kind of outside college. So like they're writing resumes, their cover letters, they're building their board of advisors. And this year the course designers included a diversity statement, because a lot of times for jobs now, that's what people want. They want to see your diversity statement. They want to make sure that you understand that, you're going to be working with a diverse group of people. How do you feel about that, basically? And I don't think the assignment went over as well as expected, because when I heard feedback about the assignment, it was basically these students are just writing superficial answers. They're not actually taking these questions into account. They're not actually doing the work that needs to be done. And so now we're faced with, how do we change that? How do we make sure that they're actually thinking these things through and not just writing down something to be done? So I think that was a real learning experience for the course designers when they heard these things yesterday in this meeting of, okay, well, maybe we need to think differently about this. And we need to think, it's almost kind of like the asset and liability, right? Because you need to think more about it as an asset and how you're going to embrace it and how your students are going to write about it, rather than it's just one more thing I have to do.
But that's part of the process, though, is collecting that evaluative information, collecting that feedback that says, hey, this didn't really land the way we thought. We're seeing these results, and now we can adjust. And what if we lived in a world where we didn't have that feedback and didn't have that piece of it? So I think I think that's where the act of reflecting actually becomes so instrumental to the mindset of diversity is a strength, is an asset. Because I think more liability-based mindset towards diversity is a more closed-minded idea of that I currently have the best way to create and manage this experience, whether it's a classroom experience, whether it's a community experience, and being resistant to any feedback that would modify that already perfect design for that. And so I think that the act of seeking, collecting, and asking for feedback is itself a diversity fueled action.
Yeah, another thing I really loved in this chapter, she talks about the power of leading from curiosity rather than judgment. Because often we'll, be like, oh, that was offensive or that was bad or whatever, and well, actually, that person didn't intend that at all. And if you lead from judgment, then you actually alienate them. And instead of making more belonging, you have less belonging. So lead from curiosity, and in terms of the evaluations, it's like, lead from hope rather than fear. Because I think sometimes when we are afraid to ask those kind of questions to students of, how is this going? What's working for you? What'd you get out of this? We're we don't ask because we're afraid to that they're going to tell us things that are going to be hurtful, or that we're going to feel like we failed them, or whatever. But if we, lead from hope and have that real genuine conversation and out of curiosity rather than fear or judgment, it can really be powerful. Which leads us to the second section of the reading, which was all about asking for course evaluation, and in multiple means of that, not just in writing, but also providing other ways for students to give feedback, and also not just at the end of the semester, but throughout the semester on an ongoing basis. You can actually use that information meaningfully in that course, because that group of students is going to be different, and the instructional methods and everything are going to sit differently with them than your next group of students, because different group of humans. So since we're all kind of instructional designers here, how have you seen that done at your institution? Kind of mid-course evaluation, mid-course correction, getting feedback from students and weaving that in to the actual instruction that's going on in the course in real time.
I'll be honest, I haven't. Not at the institution I'm at now. I've been promoting it, but people don't seem to take me up on it. And so at an institution I was previously at, I had an instructor who really wanted to know how she was doing with her teaching. And so she created this Google form, this anonymous Google form. So there was no grade attached. There was just, hey, can you fill this out? And she asked it mid-semester, and she actually changed some of the things that she did based on that feedback. For example, the discussion forums were not working in Moodle when she was using it. And so she said, okay, we're done. We won't do them anymore. And so she came up with a different way they could communicate rather than discussion forums. It wasn't like she just got rid of it and that was it. So really thinking through that feedback and what that could look like and how that can improve courses is super important. But I don't know how to let faculty know that it's super important without just kind of beating them over the head with it. So if you all have ideas, please let me know.
Mandatory anything is never a good strategy. So I like that it needs to be an opt-in to this, and you're in an encouraging role in that regard right now. And it is a tough sell, because I think as an instructor, you're faced with a lot of pressures as you're teaching the course, and the thought of adding one more thing to the very full plate can be very daunting. I do know our office, one of my colleagues is currently working on a generic mid-semester survey that we can easily deploy to anyone, or put in an obvious shared space where an instructor could copy it and then tailor it to suit their specific topics. And I think that might be a start. I think that's a question that's come up from a couple faculty that Josh and I have been supporting of, okay, what does this look like? And there's templates online that you can use, but can we do a Wentworth spin on this tool? So that's one idea. I think the other struggle with it, though, that I see from a previous job is the course is often very, built out in advance. And so it's not very agile. It becomes difficult to pivot. That's sort of the opposite problem where, on one hand, you've got a teaching strategy, which is, on the fly, adjusting every day right before the lecture, you're panicking, what do I do? But then the opposite problem is everything was, laid out, set in stone. It's not working, but it's too late to change it. So there's got to be a squishy medium, I think, between those two strategies that allow for that space and build that space into the design.
Yeah, I think Lucy, our colleague, has put together Google Forms for faculty. So I think that's been a good tool. It's funny because Tess and I worked on a grant with some faculty who wanted to design an app for exactly this purpose for mid-semester feedback. They didn't get the grant, but it was a really neat idea. And they wanted to use emoji. It was kind of interesting concept. It was unclear how actionable the feedback would be because it was a lot of just like that type of Likert style, but with emojis. So it was like, well, what are we gonna do? But still, it was nice that they had that instinct to get student feedback and try to integrate it. And as Megan said, it is tricky because there are some faculty I work with who I'm like, like they are building up next week's core plan right in the moment always, and that's kind of hard to really do a robust design with learning objectives for longer term. But it does allow for some agility, and in working with new faculty also they're also a little bit like, well, I don't even know how this is going to go because I've never done it. So let's give me a semester to try things before we try and tinker and redesign, which makes sense too. So I think there's that balance, and obviously you don't want to get to the point where you've been teaching it the same way for 12 semesters, but after you have done it for a couple of semesters, you probably will be in a better place to be able to take feedback and adjust a little bit on the fly because you have a sense of what you would do, how it is going to go, how it aligns with the objectives, and how you could make a shift and maybe do something differently. Curious at what that professor did, what she replaced discussion boards on the LMS with that still allowed students to have conversations either asynchronously or in some other way.
Don't remember. I know she replaced it with something, but I do not remember. It was a textiles instructor, and I know she told me she was replacing it with something, but I have no idea what it was. And it's been probably 6 years since I've been there. So it's been a while. But I do want to say, Megan, to your point is if you create it and then all they have to do is copy it, that's huge, because that seems to be, I don't have time to create anything. But if I create it and all they have to do is make a copy and then basically change their name instead of mine, they're a lot more ready to adapt.
Yeah, because then it becomes about facilitating the course instead of trying to design the course while the semester's unfolding around you. Sometimes that design can be very rigid, though, and that's an issue I've run into where, for example, a grade book, and this was an online learning environment, but the grade book, if you have a set of assignments, they're not working, you just want to drop the last one. Well, that structure was in place. How responsive is that structure to be able to adapt to that change? And it goes up against bringing it all the way back around to our first session where we were talking about syllabus design. The idea of a syllabus being less of a contract and more of a living, agreement, basically, that you're defining with the students as the semester unfolds. I know that there's some rigidity to how our syllabi are currently designed, and it's like, well, my syllabus said there would be 10 assignments. I can't change that to 8. I'm going to lose 200 points. So being able to get into a more agile mindset with our syllabus design as well as our course setup.
And what's funny about, you mentioned that it's like a living document. I feel like in so many syllabi, I see that statement. It's a living document, but then instructors are still reluctant to change things. So it's like, you literally say in your syllabus, this is living and you can change things, and you don't want to change things. So I think bringing that back around as a reminder, oh yeah, I can change things, has helped a little bit, but it's still, it's kind of a hard, hurdle to get over of it is living. You can change things, and they don't see that.
But change is hard and scary, and I don't like it.
Yep, exactly. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, but and I say that glibly, but there's a lot of power in that.
Mhm.
The relationship that we have to change and how that can influence our behavior, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Mhm.
Definitely. So I think let's start wrapping up with this conversation. I really like the connection that we have at the end of this last piece of reading of multiple means of feedback with universal design for learning, and this idea of universal design for learning being connected back to inclusive instruction and making explicit that we want to have these feelings, these student feelings of belonging, of inclusion, and all these ways that we're doing that. And then the theme of today of just kind of like what are ways that we've that have worked, and what are some things that haven't worked, and what can we learn from that, take it forward. So with that, let's just open up the floor to one more go around, I guess, if anyone has anything they want to share to conclude our last book club session of the semester about Tracy Addy's What Inclusive Instructors Do. Any last thoughts from y'all?
Just that I always enjoy the book clubs. I know I can't make every session, but the ones I do get to make, I just love getting to chat with y'all.
Thank you. We enjoy it as well, and I know that sometimes we're a small but mighty group, but our goal is to be able to promote collaboration and to be connected in shared visions across multiple universities here. So
definitely, and we are very grateful for you for joining, and it really is a pleasure to hop on every month and see who shows up and have nice conversations with them about all these meaningful things related to teaching and learning. We hope you'll join us again next semester. And why don't we stop the recording for now, and then we can stay on and chat a bit. So if you're watching on the YouTubes, thanks for watching. Be in touch with us at teach@wit.edu. That's teach@wit.edu. Take care.